Okay, so when you have Photoshop open, whether you're on a Chromebook or you're on your own personal computer, it should look something kind of like this. It might end up looking like this instead. I just prefer this layout better. So this is what we're looking at when we're going to start working with the program. There's a bunch of other options over here. We don't really need to be worried about too much. The main two buttons are Create New and Open. Pretty self-explanatory. Open is opening a file you've already created. Create New is opening a file that is brand new. Okay. So what we are all going to do is we're going to click on Create New. When you click on Create New, you should get an option box that shows up kind of like this. And over here, it's kind of fun. This is something you probably won't get into until later, or just want to play around with it. There's a whole bunch of cool little templates up here. There's print templates. So like if you're going to create some things here, canvas bags, tabloid, legal, business cards. There's mobile templates, which are pretty fun. iPhone 10. iPhone 876 Plus, iPhone SE, these things you can click on and it'll give you the actual layouts, which is pretty nice. I just going to go off, or we're going to go off this basic setting over here because we're going to customize it. Okay, starting a new file. This is something we're going to do every single time you make a file. There's a couple things I'm going to tell you that are our standards that we want to make sure we stick with. The first one is right here. You're going to click and highlight to add a new title on your file. It makes my life incredibly easier if you follow this technique that I'm going to show you. So what we're going to do is you are going to label your file your last name. That's my last name, so don't put my last name. Type your last name, and then you're going to type the name of the assignment. This first assignment will be test. Okay, don't press enter, just type that in, and we'll continue to move on. The next thing we need to set is the template size, or the size of our canvas that we're working on. So we have a bunch of different measurement units right here. We're going to stay with inches. If you're not already defaulted on inches, please stay on inches. It's just what we normally use. And then for our project today, go ahead and make the width 10 and the height 10. Okay, so go 10 by 10 with your height and width. This is a project you are going to turn in at the end of the day today, so make sure you're following along. Make sure you're working on this so we can get it turned in and we can all get credit for this. Okay, I should get a whole bunch of squares today because everybody's file should be set at 10 inches by 10 inches. The next is our resolution. Now, we talked a little bit about this when we talked about magazine covers and trying to find images online. So the resolution is basically how clear the image is, how many pixels it has, and how little those pixels are. We'll get into pixels in a second, okay? Our resolution should be set at pixels per inch because our file is set at inches. And then there's two numbers that we'll really go back and forth with when we're talking about our resolution. First number is 72. So in your notes, please write 72. Like maybe put resolution, then put 72. And next to the 72 that you write the words for screen presentation. I'm going to turn my closed captioning on so you guys can see what I'm saying as well if you need to catch up. 72 resolution is for screen presentation. Now, the reason why, any screen you have, the screen you're looking at right now, TVs, cell phones, the highest ratio they can really process is 72. If you go to 300 or 5,000, it's not going to look any different than a 72 would. So the reason we don't do that is if we know that we're going to be showing our images or our graphics on screens, we just keep it 72 because if we go higher, it just makes the file size larger. And we just don't need to take up that nonsense or the extra space. So what we'll do is we'll keep our resolution to 72. Now, the other number that we have is 300. Now, if I just said that screens can only process 72, what's 300 for? 300 is for when you're printing things out. Okay, so you have 72 for screen presentation written next to it. Write 300, and then write for print presentation. This is really, really important. It's something I'm going to come back to a lot, and you need to understand and have the answer for. Okay, so I do most of my printing through Costco. Costco is really inexpensive in terms of printing. When I'll design posters, like all my kids have like posters and stuff, and I'll do these really cool graphics because they're being printed out. I set them at 300, and when I send them off there, they're phenomenal. They're big, they're clear, they're easy to see. You can look up really close to them and you don't see any pixels. It's a really, really clean print. 300 is the resolution we want to work with. Now, can you go higher? Yeah, you can go to like 5,000, but the majority of the printers that you're going to be working with in your life, you won't be able to see any difference between 300 and 5,000. If we're talking about like a billboard, like a giant billboard, well, then we're going to go to like 5,000, because if you don't, you'll walk up to the billboard and see little tiny pixels all over the place. And they don't want that professionally, okay? So 72 and 300 are the big ones we're going to use. This file today is going to be presented on a screen. So let's go ahead and keep that at 72. So my numbers are, I have my last name test. I have 10 by 10, and I have 72. The next one is our color mode. Look at all these choices in our color mode. We have bitmap, grayscale, RGB, CMYK, and lab colors. These are the three that we're really going to kind of live in the realm of. The first one's super easy, grayscale. Straightforward, it's grays. You have your white, you have your black, and then every variation in between is a grayscale. If you're ever working on a project and you select a color, try to paint that color and it comes out gray, it means your file's set at grayscale instead of color. You just got to go adjust it. Okay, so we won't mess with grayscale right now. These are the two big ones that we use a lot. The first one, it's probably your default, the one that you're already selected on right now, is RGB. So please write RGB. Now, RGB stands for red, green, blue. Now, it's a little bit different now, but back in the day, I remember my grandma had a pretty decent-sized tube TV, a glass TV, and she'd always say, "Ian, don't sit so close." So I would go sit really close, and I get really, really close to the TV, and I'd look at it like that, and I'd see little tiny bars on the screen, and the bars were red, green, and blue, red, green, and blue. Yeah, some of you are nodding your head. You've seen that before. Okay, those red, green, and blues shoot lights out at our eyes, and then our eyes see the colors mixing, and that gives us all the multiple colors we have on our screen. So RGB, remember, like I said before, 72 is for screen presentation, 300 is for print presentation. RGB colors are for screen presentation. If you're going to present a project on a screen, whether it's an app, a cell phone, whatever, you're going to want to save it as an RGB. So on your notes, RGB for screen presentation. The other color mode that we have is CMYK. Now, CMYK, C stands for cyan. CYAN. M stands for magenta. Y stands for yellow. And K stands for, anybody know? I had a kid one time go, black. Ketchup. No, definitely not a color. K stands for black, or also known as key. Because what's B? B's already blue. Okay. Now, if RGB is for screen presentation, CMYK is for print presentation. If you think about, if you ever had to change the print cartridges in your computer, or your printer, I mean, you pop the printer open, there's a little light blue cartridge, that's cyan. There's a yellow, there's a pink cartridge, which is magenta, and there's a black cartridge, which is black. So just a little scientific thing. The colors red, green, and blue, when they are projecting light, they mix better than cyan, magenta, yellow, and black do. If you have cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and you shoot those colors out, then the colors aren't going to look right. But cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, because they are bright and they are vibrant, they reflect light better than red, green, and blue do. So if you're using a printer, if you're using a program like this, you want to make sure your screen stuff is RGB. It'll be brighter. It'll be more vibrant. And you want to make sure the stuff you're printing is CMYK. The CMYK will look really bland on the screen because the light coming out of it isn't very strong. But when you print it out, it'll reflect and look really, really nice. So it's really important to have those two things in your understanding. We won't worry about how many bits and worry about the custom contents and all the other stuff that we have here. What I'm looking for right now is last name test, 10 inches by 10 inches. Resolution is 72. And we're at our RGB color because we're going to be presenting on a screen. Once you have all that stuff done, come down to create, click on create, and you should have a canvas open like this. Okay. I can't see your computers, so I'm hoping everybody is here. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the layout of Photoshop, because it's really important to understand where all the things work. I kind of use the analogy, it's like a chef. And if a chef goes into a kitchen, they don't walk into the kitchen and start pulling open the drawers and try to find out where everything is and just mess it up. They listen, okay, this is where the cups are, this is where the silverware is, this is where the trash is, and then they have their bearings, and then they can go work through it, okay? Photoshop, the Adobe suites in general, all look very similar. Photoshop and Illustrator, the two programs we're going to work with, are super, super, super similar to the point where sometimes when I'm working in both of them, I'll get confused on which one I'm supposed to be working in, and I'll get kind of lost. But they're laid out similarly, so it's really important to figure some of those things out as we go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is right here in the middle, this big white box that you have there. You should all have a white box. That's called our canvas. It's like having a painting canvas in front of you. Okay, it's just going to be blank. It's the stuff that we add stuff to, and that will always be there with this kind of gray background unless you decide to change it at some point. On the left-hand side, we have what's called our toolbar. Okay, and this is where the majority of the tools that we're going to use in this class are held. Our move tool is the very top one, our zoom tool is the bottom one, and then we have some other choices down here. Down at the bottom of the toolbar, you have two boxes. There's one on the left, it should be your black box, it should look like this, and there's one on the right, it's a white box. The left box is called our foreground color, something you can write down if you're an avid note taker. The left box is your foreground color. That's basically going to change the color of the paint that you are using in your project. The one on the right is our background color. Okay. Yeah, click create. Layla, are you still lost on that? It's okay. It's okay, Sky. Let's go ahead and hold tight. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to be talking like this for a little bit, so we shouldn't get you too behind. So here's my foreground color, and this is my background color. Okay. Some specific things about our toolbar over here on the side. When I click on a tool, like say my move tool at the top, if I hover, it'll show me what the tool does, which is very helpful. This new Creative Cloud. And it will also give me my name, but right here, this is what we call a quick key. Okay. Quick keys are super, super helpful because it makes your process a lot faster when you go. I would recommend somewhere on your note sheet, draw a little box and write quick keys. And maybe we can write down the quick keys in there. So there's a couple quick keys I'm going to cover today that'll really, really, really help you when we're adjusting our sizes of our paintbrushes and images and all the other stuff. So when you hover over again, it tells you what the tool does or what it looks like, what it does, and then it gives you the quick key for it. Okay. The other thing is if you look at this bar up here, this is our options bar. And as I click, that bar changes because every tool that I have has its own little options that go along with it. Okay. So that's really helpful. The last part about the toolbar that's helpful is if I have a tool like this top move tool, and if there's a little tiny arrow, see that little tiny arrow in the bottom right-hand corner of that box? If there's a little arrow on it and I click and hold, it gives me multiple tools inside of it. Look at my paintbrush. My paintbrush is down here. If I click and hold it, it gives me a pencil, a color replacement, a mixer brush. So all these different things that I can utilize. Let's see, where's another one that has a lot. This one has a couple. This one right here is a couple. So whenever you have that, you have multiple tools that are underneath it. They're super, super helpful. Okay. So there's, let's see, our options bar, our toolbar, and then over here is a bunch of our windows. And the windows allow us to do a bunch of really fun effects. The most important window to keep track of is this window right here that says layers. Okay. And the reason why it's so important is that's going to like maintain the integrity of your entire program. So, oh, Quinn, sorry, I just saw your comment. Yours is really small. Everybody hold tight real quick. That might mean that when you went, let me go back real quick. When you're right here, if some of you have this really small white box, you probably didn't change this to inches. And that is, instead it says pixels. And that means it's really, really tiny. So you're 10 pixels by 10 pixels. Go to inches. So close your file. Go back. Make sure that it's 10 inches by 10 inches. And then make sure you rename it correctly. Thanks for voicing up because I usually miss that one in class as well. So it's good. Okay, so back to our layers. This is how Photoshop kind of works. It's like back in the day, I don't know if you guys are too young for this. Like in elementary school, if you had teachers that had an overhead projector, take a piece of plastic, yeah, good, laid it down, you write on it with pen. When they're ready to erase it, they spray it and they wipe it all off, right? So Photoshop is kind of like a piece of paper with a bunch of overhead projections. Because what happens is this white page that we have here, if you look at the layer, it says background. So that's our background. That's a white piece of paper on the table. Now, if we take a pen and we draw on that background, we draw on that white piece of paper, the ink is on the piece of paper. And we can take paint, put it on the paper. We can take a bunch of stuff and put on it, but it's going to mess up that original paper. But if we take a clear overhead transparency and lay it on top, and then we draw on top of that overhead transparency, we can later take that away and our paper is still fine. Might not make sense right now. It hopefully will in a second, okay? The moral of the story here is this is where your layers are going to be held. And at some point, you might end up having multiple layers. But understanding how it works over here is really, really important to being successful in this project. I didn't understand that when I learned this in college. I just kind of jumped into it and had no classes, trying to figure it out. And I got so lost for so long. So I'm really trying to make sure we're taking little steps. Now, with that being said, I'm assuming, because I've taught this class for years, that a bunch of you have already painted stuff on here and you're drawing faces and you're writing letters and you're doing all this crazy stuff. You're just playing with all the tools while I'm talking. I don't want you to do that because I don't want you to fall behind. But hopefully you know how to erase it and we'll be fine, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to start putting some marks on here. So I'm going to go to my paintbrush, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th tool down. I'm going to grab my paintbrush and I'm going to come over to my canvas. The next thing I'm going to do with my paintbrush is selected is I'm going to select the color. I'm going to keep it black right now. I have black. And then I'm going to click and drag. And that allows me to paint on my canvas. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now, if I want to change my color, I'm going to double click on my foreground color, and it gives me this color picker. I like the color picker. It's pretty fun. I have red as my choice right now, so I can get all these different tints and shades of red. Or if I want to, I can go to the top left-hand corner and get a pure white, or the top left-hand corner and get a pure black. If I don't want to use red, I can grab this white arrow, and I can adjust my hue, which is my color, to try to find one that I want to use. Say I go here, that's the color that I want. I press OK, and now I can add color like that. Okay, so I can paint over this. I can change another color. Green, yay. Right, very 80s. Okay, so I'm gonna play with this. I can put some different layers, but remember what's happening is I'm coloring on my paper. Let's look at our layer. I did all this stuff. You can kind of do the same thing too if you want. If I look at my background, this little thumbnail, when we talked about thumbnails with our magazines, little tiny image, the thumbnail that I have here has all of this stuff shown in it. So that means that I know now it's on my background. The problem is if I grab my move tool, because I want to move this stuff around, I can't. It says you can't do it. Okay, it'll ask me to convert to a layer. I don't want to do that. Basically, I've painted it on my paper and I can't do anything about it. So what I'm going to see, my brush is different. Like when I draw a line, ooh, it's fuzzy. Okay, we'll get to that. Victoria, we'll get to your question too. All of you Me Too folks with the fuzzy paintbrush. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to get rid of this. How we're going to do that is we're going to erase it. So the eraser is 3 tools underneath my paintbrush. I'll click on that. And then I'll come out here and I'll start erasing. This. And I'm going to erase, and erase, and erase, and erase. That's super annoying, right? I don't want to sit here for an hour and a half trying to erase all this stuff. So this is where we're going to get into what you just talked about with your fuzzy edges. Remember I said every tool you select has a different options bar up here. With my eraser selected, I'm going to come up here and click where it has this number and a little circle above it. And that is my brush size and my brush hardness. Okay, this is really important when we're using our paintbrushes and we're really using our erasers. And we're going to use eraser a lot for our first project. So it's important we kind of follow along right now. Now the size of my brush says 4 pixels, which is why it's so tiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this and I'm going to take the size to 322 pixels. Look at that. And now I can click and go like this. And I can get rid of all of it. Pretty nice. And now I can go back and draw. Now look at my paintbrush. My paintbrush is still small because it's at 30 pixels. But this is where we have our little discrepancy. And I like this part of this tool. So watch. I'm going to make my paintbrush larger. Ooh, how did I do that? Quick keys. So here's the first quick key. My handy dandy camera. If I look at my keyboard, right next to P on my keyboard, there are 2 brackets. I would draw somewhere on your notes 2 squares side by side. Inside the left square, draw this little left bracket. Inside the right square, draw the right bracket. And then how I do this in my notes, normally in class, under the left bracket, I'm going to draw a minus sign. Under the right bracket, I'm going to draw a plus sign. And if you watch me play with these, my cursor, where'd you go? If I press the one on the right, it does nothing. Oh, erase that. There you go. If I press the one on the right, see my screen, my brush gets larger. Press the one on the left, my brush gets smaller. It's a lot faster than scrolling up and hitting on this brush thing here and doing that. Okay, so those two work really, really well. Okay, first quick key, fantastic. It'll make everything so much faster when you're doing your work. Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to make this large, and I'm going to click once. Nice. Have a nice little circle here. Now, when I do that, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to. If you want to play with it, that's fine too. But I'm just showing you guys. I'm going to click on my zoom tool. I'm going to zoom in. And what do we start seeing? Pixels. Little tiny blocks. Little blocks of color. And we realize when we get really close, it's not really a hard black line. It fades a little bit, right? There's some light gray out here, some medium gray, dark gray, and then black. So if I zoom in like this, I can see that edge. Here's my next quick key. Alt. We will live a lot in this range right here. Alt, Shift, Controls, Command, or Apple is the one if you're on a Mac computer. Okay, but this next tool that I have for you is Alt. It's Command if you're on a Mac computer. Okay, so watch what happens if I click on Alt. Alt, this is for your notes. Draw a little box. Put Alt. Alt flips our tools. What I mean by that is if I zoom in, see how my magnifying glass that I have is all white now? There's not a little plus sign in it anymore. If I hold Alt, look what happens. Now there's a minus sign. So I can zoom out. Like that. If I let go of Alt, it's a plus sign now. And I can zoom in again. Okay, so Alt flips our tools for us. Again, it's just something that makes everything a little bit faster. Okay, so I've seen pixels. I'm going to zoom back out. I have my size. The size of my brush is set at 200. Well, what about this hardness aspect down here? What that is the hardness of the edge of your brush. So 100 means it's a solid black circle. So let me take this 100 down to 0. Now, look at my circle. I haven't changed the size. It's still the same size, but I just changed the hardness of it, and this is what it'll look like now. It's a really soft edge brush, kind of like a spray can. Like if I hold the spray can really close to the wall and go, psh, it'll make a solid black circle. If I come back, go, psh, it'll spray and kind of fan out. Okay, and then just for research sake, let me come here and I'll make this about 50% in between. So going back to you guys' questions, saying my brush looks fuzzy, that's totally fine. It just means that the hardness of the edge of your brush is lower. You can pull that up or you can pull that back. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to give you about 2 minutes, and I want you to use your brush size, the brush hardness, flip around your colors a little bit, and I want you to draw a picture. You can do smiley faces, you can do trees, you can do whatever, but just kind of play with the tools, kind of get used to how you can work with them, okay? You get the layers screen. Adam, good question. Here's mine showing color. It's a little tab up on the top, so try to find the one that says layers. Adam's question is how mine shows colors, not layers. So you're trying to do that. If you can't find that, you want to go up here to window, and you'll go down to layers, and that will open that for you, Adam. Okay, go ahead and play with that for a little bit, and I'll be back in a Okay, so I'm going to break your hearts. Grab your eraser and erase what you just made. I'm sorry. So sad. Now, I've said before, we've got our pixels, we've got our colors, we're making our brush size larger, smaller, playing with it, all that type of stuff. Now we're going to focus on our layers. So I have my background layer like I've done before. We are painting directly onto my background layer. If I grab my move tool, I can't move that around. I can't adjust it at all, right? So what I'm going to do now, let's go like this. I'm going to let's go like this. I'll take my paintbrush. I'll get a generic color. I'll go black. It's fine. Make my brush smaller. And I go like this. Here's my crooked house. It's a hobbit house. Okay. I can't move any of that. But if I go to my layers, you see I have this drawn right here, and I go down to the bottom of my layers window. There's a trash can, there's a box of plus sign, a little file folder, there's like a gradient folder, some other things. I'm going to click on the box that has the plus sign in it. And when I do that, I now have another layer. So my background layer is down here. My layer 1 is now basically a clear transparency. And now what I can do is I can change my color. I'll go to yellow. Oops. I'll make my brush larger. And I have a sun. Ooh, and the kind of soft sun ends up working all right. Now, remember, these two layers are separate. So you look at my background, and I have my little house thing drawn. And then my layer 1, I have a little yellow dot up here. So if I grab my move tool, and my layer 1 is selected, now I can drag my sun around. And I can move it because it's on a separate layer. Remember my analogy at the first. Okay. What happened? I'm attached to it. I already named it. We're having a lot of tech problems, huh, guys? Okay. So what happens now is I can have these two separate layers. I have my white piece of paper with my image drawn on my house, and then I have my overhead transparency on top of it with my yellow sun that I can move around. Okay. Now, let me show you this. I will delete this layer by just pressing backspace. With this layer, I will erase everything. And then I'm going to go with a new layer again. Now, let me grab a really ugly color real quick. That's pretty ugly. I'll take my paintbrush. I'll make this smaller, and I'll go like this. Boo! Okay, so I have this really ugly thing here now, okay? Ugh. But it's on its own layer. So now I can grab this, and I can move this around wherever I want it to be. I can adjust it. I'm also going to add another layer again. So here's my layer right here. I have my background. I have layer 1. Again, down at the bottom, next to the trash can, there's a little box that has the plus sign in it. I click there. That creates another layer. And then I'm going to change my color of my brush. Let me go up to red. And I'll get my paintbrush and go like this. On my second layer now, Okay, so now I have that on one layer, and I have this one on another layer. If I take my move tool, I can move that around. If I click on layer 1, oops. If I click on layer 1, I can move that one around. Now I'm going to add another layer. Mackenzie, what keeps kicking you out? The program kicks you out? Is the program's kicking you out, Mackenzie? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, again, this is being recorded right now, so I'll post it later, and we can do that. Now, so Camille, you say, can you only have one drawing for each? Like, no, you can draw a ton of it. But remember, what happens is kind of like works on like the white piece of paper. If I have this drawing, layer 2, and I go with, say, a blue, and I paint like this along with it, that blue is now covering the red, and I can't move them independently. So if you do want to have multiple layers, you want to make sure you probably want to stick to one color or one image per layer. If you don't mind and you want these to be paired together now, like this, so now I move them both, then I can do it like that, okay? On my third layer, that I have this third layer now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this one. I'll go with a purple. Boop. And I'll get a paintbrush, and I'll go like this. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. So now I have these 3 different layers, these 2 horrible colored representations. And what I'm going to do is I can adjust these layers. Now, on the left-hand side of our layers, this is a really, really important part for our layers. We have these little eyes. They're the layer visibility. So what happens is right here, I don't want to see the OSU anymore. So what I do is I come over to my layer and I click on it. And now it's gone. Now I have just these 2 by themselves. But that doesn't look right because the W is on top of the red cross out, right? So all I have to do, remember, go back to the analogy I gave you before with the white paper and the clear overhead transparencies. If I have my red transparency here and my purple transparency here, all I need to do in real life is to grab the red one and pull it out on top of the purple one. So what will happen over here is, see, I have that little hand. I'll click and it'll make it a fist, and I'll drag it up over the W. So that little line pops up above the W, and I let go, and now I've adjusted my layers. If I turn my OSU back on, now I can jump back and forth between the 2 of these. I can put them both in there. I can do whatever. The final thing that's important to understand with this layer section, with the eyeballs, go ahead with me. If your layer is blank, if you have paint on it, I'm not worried about what you have on it right now. Go down to the background layer and click on the eyeball of the background layer. And what that does is it shows you this gray and white checkerboard. Okay, here's a note. The gray and white checkerboard is called your transparency grid. Transparency is really important, and it goes through all the Adobe programs. And basically what that means is your background is clear. It's kind of like it's a sticker and with a clear background on, or it's an overhead transparency. Why that's important is because now I realize, okay, this W layer isn't white and purple. It's just purple. The red layer isn't, like if I look like this, if I have this and it's white and red, I can't put anything behind it. But because it is transparent, well, now I know that I can turn on this W and I can have that be behind it. And I can move it around and it'll be transparent. If you go on Google, you look up a cartoon character or something like that, and you go to download it, it has this little white and gray box all over it. That means that usually you can open that in a program like Photoshop and you can drop it on something and you don't have to cut it out. It's already cut out for you because the background is transparent. Okay, so that's super, super important. Now, what you're going to do for me right now, we have about 10, 20 minutes or so left. What our project is going to be is I'm going to give you about probably 4 minutes. I'm going to sit here to kind of help some of you that are struggling with stuff, unless your program is not working. We got to address that later. But if you're just having little questions about this, I'll kind of open that as we work. And you're going to draw a picture, and I want you to utilize multiple layers, multiple colors. You can use your paintbrush size, kind of play with everything we've gone over, and just experiment. This is our test. You're not going to be graded on the quality. You're not going to be graded on like what you end up making. I just want to see something on a canvas, okay? And then before about 5 minutes, 10 minutes before class is over, I'll show you how we save it, and then you'll turn it into an assignment that I'm going to post while we're doing this, okay? So for the next 5 minutes or so, go ahead and start playing on your canvas and create something here. Okay, so hopefully those of you that have things that are working right now have something that's drawn up on your screen. We're going to go through the saving process real quick. Really, really important that we understand a couple different things here, and then we'll wrap our class up. So going back to the screen that I have over here, once you have your stuff on here, again, I just want some pixels on a canvas, some layers over here. I'm going to go up to the very top left. I'm going to click on File, kind of like we normally would with any other program. And then I'm going to make sure I click Save As, because when you click Save As, you make sure you assign it to a specific place to save. So I'm going to go to Save As. In my computer, I have my desktop. I have downloaded some other folders. I'll just save it to my desktop for right now. It's still named Reynoso Test. If you're on a Chromebook, I believe it'll have like your drive, your Google Drive right here. So you can click on the Google Drive to save it there. But here's the important notes to take on our saving process, okay? With the Save As type, the first type that we'll talk about is the Photoshop type. It's the default, Photoshop or .psd. And what that means is it's going to save your file, but it's also going to save all of the layers on your file. And it's going to save them as layers. So when you come back next class to open it, you can open it up and all those layers will still be there. And you can move them around, you can draw on them and do all that type of stuff, okay? So if you're going to continue working on your program, or on your project, I mean, you want to make sure you save it as a PSD. They're usually larger files in terms of file size, but that's what we're gonna want to save it as if we're going to continue to work on it class after class. Now, if you're done with it, you're going to save it as a JPEG. There's 3 JPEG options, but we'll go to the top one, JPEG.jpg. And what a JPEG is, it's a compressed image file. So again, PSD is an editable large Photoshop file. A JPEG is a compressed image file. Now what that means is when I go to this JPEG right here, it's going to compress my entire file and all the layers. It'll take all those transparencies I have. I can have 5,000 layers, and it's going to go whoop, and it's going to get rid of all of them. And it's going to make it one solid image. Okay, so if we save it as a JPEG, really, really important, if you save it as a JPEG, you come back to work on it next class, it's going to be flat. You can't mess with the layers anymore. You can't adjust it. It's all just like one picture. So we save it as JPEG, we're ready to turn something in. So for this project today, we'll go ahead and save it as a JPEG. It's just a test. Again, it's not anything crazy. So it should be your last name, and test is our name. File type is JPEG. You go ahead and save it. And then what will happen from there, if I go to our classwork, you see the assignment Photoshop test. You'll go ahead and open up Photoshop test, and you'll turn that in here. And that'll be where I will grade your assignment for the day, and I'll give you points for getting your work done today. Okay? Really sorry for any issues that we're having that I can't address right now because I'm away from you guys. Really quick to understand. You can save, probably just save to your cloud. It'll probably Angel, your question is to save on cloud or Chromebook. Probably just save on the cloud. That would be simpler. It'll be easier to turn in your projects if you're saved on the cloud. That's the way to say it. It's really important that the whole class follows the steps of a couple of the students that have been saying, hey, how do we do this? How do I, because I can't see your mistake on your computer like when I'm walking around the classroom. So like Angel says, hey, how do I do this? Super awesome. Quinn did the same thing. Sky did the same thing. Thomas does the same thing. So being able to like voice that is really, really important to me. Feel free too that if I'm talking about something, you've asked a question and it's taken like 3 minutes and I haven't seen it because I'm doing stuff over on this side. Just unmute yourself. Say, hey, Mr. Noso, I had a question real quick. It's totally fine. You're not interrupting. Like this is, we all got to work through this together. Okay. So I appreciate that. Go ahead and get that turned in. And if you're ready to go, then you're done and you go and sign off for the day. We'll come back tomorrow and start our next project and be ready to go. All right. Thanks so much for working with us today, guys. See you later.